Loreto College, Kolkata, Departments of English and History International Conference, sponsored by Indian Council of Social Science Research. Wow, mapping memory, history, texts and cultures. 22nd and 23rd February 2024. আজি আমাৰ ল'ৰাৰ কনফাৰেন্স আছে আৰু এখন লৰেটো কলেজৰ কলকাতাৰ লৰেটো কলেজ চাওকচোন কিমান পুৰণি বলক ভিতৰলৈ যাওঁ আৰু আজি আমাৰ ল'ৰাই গৱেষণা পত্ৰ পাঠ কৰিব আপোনালোকে সম্পূৰ্ণ ভিডিঅ'টো চাব বুলি আশা কৰিছোঁ আৰু চাই উৎসাহিত কৰিব আৰু দীপ্তি শৰ্মা বৰুৱাৰ আন এক ভ্লগলৈ আপোনালোকক স্বাগতম জনাইছোঁ বলক আৰু যিসকল নতুন তেখেতসকলে যাতে মোৰ চেনেলটো ছাবস্ক্ৰাইব কৰি থৈ যায় ৱাও ইমান ডাঙৰ কলেজ এখন গাৰ্লছ কলেজ একচুৱেলি
Last paper of the session, Barua, who is not my student. I think you can understand why. I teach in a women's college. He is going to read a paper on the role of memory in the reconstruction of tribal history in Northeast India. A study of literature's process in the works of Kynpham, Nongkynrih, Nzanmongi, Patton, and Mamang.
Thank you so much. So, good afternoon everyone. As Matt read out, I will be talking about three authors here and three of their books. I would like to talk about why I chose these particular books and I'll just come to that in a bit. But before that, so there is this book from Kynpham Nongkynrih, Around the Hearths. It's a book of basically has folk tales and legends. Then there is Nzanmongi Patton's A Girl Swallowed by a Tree. Okay, so this is from Meghalaya, this is from Nagaland. Okay, and there is this Lotha tribe in Nagaland, so it is their sort of folk tales. And this is, of course, Mamang The Legends of Kynpham. Okay, so this entails sort of legends from the Adi tribe of Arunachal Pradesh. Right now, a role of memory in the reconstruction of tribal history in Northeast India. What we first of all need to understand, is that among most of the communities of the Northeast, there is a lack of written histories. Okay, so in Assam, the Mamang Empire was there, so they had their Burachis, which was written. In Manipur, there was a royal chronicle. In Tripura, there was a royal chronicle, right? But even then, in Assam, there are lots and lots of tribes, not only the Ahoms. Again, in Tripura, same thing. In Manipur, there are Kampuras. So none of them have any sort of written history, right? And the other states, Mizoram, Nagaland, Meghalaya, totally oral, right? So what happens in this sort of a situation? Orality depends on memory to make sense of their history, right? So these narration of memories have, it constructs the histories of that place. So it sometimes happens directly and sometimes happens indirectly via folklore, right? And folk tales, as you all know, is a part of folklore, right? So what happens in this particular situation is that when one narrates, yesterday we had a session, the first session with Parvisa, he was talking about forgetting. In memory, there is this aspect of forgetting, right? So I tell you a story, you tell someone else the story, you forget a bit of it, and then you either miss it completely or you put in some of your own masala, what they call it, right? And then so that has been happening from generations and generations and generations. That's what's been happening in the Northeast, right? Now, in the Northeast Indian English fictions, right? So when I said there is no written history in Northeast, there is also no written script. That is why there is no written history. Now, during the post-colonial time, these people had a choice of which language to write in. In Assam, I can make a choice whether to write in Assamese or in Bengali or in English, Hindi, or all of these. So these people end up with English. Right? These people, people from Mizoram, people from Meghalaya, people from Nagaland, they end up with English, right? So in Northeast Indian English fictions, this process of construction of history is being seen. Now, why do I call it reconstruction of history and not simply construction? I'll come to that in my presentation. right? But first of all, we need to understand that this reconstruction of the history is a way of reclaiming agency, the agency of telling their own story themselves, rather than having the center at New Delhi telling their story, right? Or for that matter, even the center at Guwahati, because Nagaland, Meghalaya, they were all part of the SAM at one point in time. Why did they carve out their own states? Because they felt they were not being heard. Their identity was being bulldozed, right? Okay, so these are the three primary things that I talked about. So the scope, one has to understand, is not the whole of Meghalaya. We need to understand that Meghalaya is it's a colonial concept. Who told them that the Khasis and Garos and the Jaintiyas are similar people and they should form one state together? Who told them? The Garos have more in common with the Boros of Assam. The Khasis have more in common with the Tiwas of Assam. Absolutely two different cultures, not interacting. And we'll see how they are not interacting anytime in the ancient history. And who told them that you two should come together and form a common state? It's a colonial concept. Right? So here I am looking only at the Khasis, in Nagaland only the Lothas, in Arunachal only the Adis, right? So, because folk tales narrate to us an ancient history, a pre-colonial history, not the post-colonial history, right? Okay, so these are the research questions. How does memory reconstruct history in the special case of oral culture, right? It would be a different process in the case of culture which already has a written word, right? How do folk tales and retelling them play a role in this situation? And how does presenting them as English fictions, what does it do here in this case? Research objectives, outlining how literature narrates the histories fed by memories presented in the form of folk tales. How does this written literature, the books, how do they narrate it, right? Then identifying the counter narratives of the margins to the established history of the center. This is what I just said. These are traces of the margin. When they reconstruct their history, when they reclaim their agency of telling their own story, they basically make a counter narrative, right? To the history that we all already know in our history books, the NCRT books, right? And then looking at the concerned historiography by establishing the writings of metafiction. I'll come to that towards the end of the presentation. Next. Okay. So memory reconstructing history. First of all, there is the Chinese discourse situation, which I already mentioned a bit. Oral narratives are spread down the line. And now, why I have written spread and not passed? Okay, yes, they are passed, but it is also spread. One person doesn't tell the story to only one person. One person tells the story to 10 people. Those 10 say it to 10 more each. So that is 100, right? So when one person tells it to 10 people, those 10 people will again narrate it differently. It's not like all of them will make the same mistake, all of them will make the same forgetting. No, right? 10 different forgettings out there. Okay, then there is the concept of memory and forgetfulness. So we have different narratives, each a reconstruction of the previous passed to the narrator. That's the first point. Secondly, the British and Indian centers and their written histories, right? The so-called archival history. So when we work with history historiography, we call them archival history, right? These are not archived histories. So there are those histories, and when a person from Nagaland, publishes a particular book, in the preface it has been written that how she has a difficulty finding a publisher, right? So when she publishes that book, now it is finally tangible. Now a person from New Delhi doesn't have to come and learn the Lotha language and listen to the village elders to get to know their story. Now it is tangible and it can be used as an argument against the sort of archival history that is prevalent, right? And possible in an oral culture only because of collective memory. So when we write something, okay, we might not need cultural memory that much. Okay, I want to know something authentic, so-called, about the Assamese history, I can go and read up a manuscript, which of course has become old, and then I'll have to do something with that. But I can read a manuscript. In their case, no manuscript to be read. So the spoken word becomes the all-in-all, right? And so in an oral culture, this sort of an exercise is only possible only and only because of collective memory. That is the role that memory plays. Okay, then why are they writing in English, right? The folk tales in English. So they are basically documenting the memory and the history, ancient and pre-colonial, not the post-colonial. right? And they are contesting the homogeneities imposed on the particular state culture. Now, what are those homogeneities? First of all, language homogeneity, right? And they are trying to assert a particular sense of language heterogeneity, right? So, in around the earth, what we see is the superiority of the spoken word in Khasi culture. So in the preface, he writes that the Khasis have never been, a primitive culture. Civilization did not come to them only with schools. He has written that they have been known for their agriculture, commerce, trade, and everything. They were communicating with the plains of Assam and Sylhet, right? So basically, they are. He and also Janice Parria in her book Boats on Land, they are talking about the superiority of the spoken word. Also, there is a trend of owning English and injecting Khasi into the English vocabulary. Kynpham and Nongkynrih and also Janice Parria, they never put their Khasi words in italics. They put it in, straight letters, and they want the readers from America, from Canada, from Australia to decode it, just the way we decode something such as marzipan or hamburger. Who knows what they actually are, right? Okay. In the case of a girl swallowed poetry, there is a very different arc of the language situation. So there is no written published literature at all, and English is the be-all and end-all. The missionaries had a lot more power in Nagaland, and oral traditions are verging on obsolescence, and they are not challenging the written word. But then there is a very interesting thing here. Next slide, please. Okay, if I compare that with The Burnham for My Head, which was written by Temsula Au, again, from Nagaland, but a different community. She is Au and Nzanmongi Patton is Lotha. But that is not the more important part. The more important part is that Patton talks about folk tales, which is a pre-colonial history. And Temsula Au writes about a post-colonial history. In that particular sense, in Temsula Au's works, we see that the oral traditions exist, not getting obsolete, but also not challenging the written word. I'll tell you the difference. She talks about the lingua franca, Naga means. Okay, she is not dealing with the Ao language. So there are 16 major tribes in Nagaland. All of them do not understand each other. They have a lingua franca, which is a sort of Opopongsho of Assamese, which is called Nagamese. Okay, Temsula Ao is talking about the Nagamese language. So that oral tradition is not getting obsolete, but also not challenging. But on the other hand, previous slide please. On the other hand, the Lotha language, which is only theirs, it is absolutely verging on obsolescence. Right? Okay. And influence of Assamese is evident because it was sort of ruled by the Assamese rulers for some time, and there was a communication and all. Also, the Lotha words are not injected in the vocabulary; they are written, but their meanings are given. There is an attempt to explain those, right? So there is a very different arc of how the Khasis and the Lothas are looking at English or other languages. Next slide, yeah. In Legends of Pensar, so in Arunachal Pradesh, what happened? During publishing, there is published literature from Arunachal, but the first phase was written in Assamese, then in Hindi, and the third phase, recently, in English. But all of these three are post-colonial processes, right? There is an obsolescence of orality in that case also, and there is a very, very naturalized use of English. So when Mamang writes, there are no Adi words at all. Forget about whether they have given the meaning or whether they have not put it in italics. There are no Adi words. Each and every Adi thing she explains in English. So she calls a particular person who could be called something else in Adi, she calls him a shaman. So that anyone can easily understand that's a shaman. So it's a very naturalized use of English, and absolutely there is no Assamese influence. Okay. Now, geography and culture. So the one homogeneity that's there is that all three spaces are just the same people with the same history, the Northeastern. So when I work with Northeastern literature, many times I see that there is this homogeneity, Northeastern literature, Northeastern history. What is that? We are not all a whole or something. We might be 8 very united states. We might be the 7 sisters, but we are not the same. Okay? So that even within the states, now look at this map very, very carefully. So these 4 districts are the Khasi Hills, and these are the Garo Hills, and these are the Jantia Hills. Now, the Khasis, they have always had more access to the plains of Assam, which is to the north, and to the plains of Sylhet, which is to the south, rather than going to the east or west, crossing all these hills and going and interacting with other people, right? And there is absolutely no mention of the areas of the present day Nagaland or Arunachal Pradesh there. So it shows that how they were a nation in itself. How, it's not like, oh, we are all the same people just because today in 2024 we call them Northeast. They are not the same people, right? Even they are not the same people along with Garos and Jain. That's the interesting point. So Meghalaya is absolutely a colonial concept. Next. Okay. Even the isolation of the Lotha area is spoken about. So this is the map of Nagaland. This is the Wokha district in Greece, and that is the sort of area of the Lotha tribe. And it is very well mentioned, and in many parts of the folk tales, isolated, it has been mentioned there. And there is a communication with the plains of Assam to this side, and this side, rather than going through the hills and communicating with the Aos and Sumis or the Angams. And definitely not from Kynpham. And even Nagaland is a constructed concept. So these areas were Naga frontier tracts, and these areas were a part of Assam, and both Kynpham, so the modern storyline also is limited to the Siang Valley, the starred areas, wherever you can see the stars, that's where the Adi people mostly reside. And there is no sort of contact with the other tribes of other states. Now, it might have been a different situation if it was a Nokte folktale or a Wancho folktale, because they stay in the Tiram district and they might be communicating with Nagaland, but Adis from here are definitely not communicating with Nagaland or Meghalaya. Okay, then, so basically what they are trying to do here is repaint themselves. Okay. What is the paint, first of all? The paint is that all three states, so-called Meghalaya, Nagaland, or Arunachal, all three are what? Sites of violence. Okay? And what have they repainted themselves as? As warrior cultures, but peace-loving, nature-loving people, no hunger for conquest, only autonomy. And when that autonomy is harmed, they go up in arms or in protest, right? That is the repaint that they have showed themselves via these books. Then again, there is a paint that Arunachal Pradesh has affinities to China and Tibet. We read this. This is ancient history. The repaint, no such affinities. In fact, the Adis majorly follow the Doi Polo religion. Doi is the sun and Polo is the moon, worshipping the sun and moon. And the not Buddhism, which is seen more in Tibet and everything since ancient times, right? Next. So this is the last slide. So basically what I'm trying to say is how historiography is being shown to metafiction. What is historiography? Historiography is the process of writing history or narrating history per se, right? In very basic terms. And again, what is metafiction in very basic terms? Metafiction is when a fiction is self-aware, when it talks about itself, the processes it is involving in itself, right? Now, I'll give you one example and then later we can discuss it. So in Around the Hearth, and a similar trend I saw in both Funland by Janice Faria as well. So even in Around the Hearth, what we see is Kynpham Singh Nongkynrih writes, that too in English, right? But mentions how writing the spoken word was not needed since the classes were civilized since long before that. So what is he asserting? He is asserting that the classes were civilized long before that. Why do we need the written word? Right? But even then, that's exactly what he does. First of all, he writes. And why is he not, why is he not an oral storyteller? Why is he not like a vowel then? Right? He is writing, and that too in English, not even in Farsi, right? But then he is talking about this. So he is doing exactly the opposite of what he is saying, right? Now, this process of metafiction, what does it tell us about the history of, let's say, Meghalaya? Not Meghalaya, the Khasi area, right? A region which firstly actively resisted English and the colonizers. They have a history of actively resisting them, that we can find in Janice Faria's books and other books. They later became the poster child of those rulers. Shillong, Cherrapunji, loved by the British. And we go there now, the rock capital of India, the jazz capital of India, and everything. So how did these people who actively resisted English become a poster child of those rulers? Right? So this is shown by the metafiction that we see here, again here as well, I am wary of the homogeneity because the Garo areas, Tura, Williamnagar, Ampati, they did not become the poster child of the British. They did not become favorite retreats. It was all in the Khasi hills only, right? So I think I might have been able to give you a brief, idea of the sort of work that I'm doing. So this is sort of related to the work I'm doing in my PhD as well, right? So with that, thank you so much. This is me, Arvind Barwa, and Department of Editors, and I think you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please sit down. So I think Agrit performed a very important function. I remember during the pandemic we had many webinars and there was one on partition. And over there they talk about how the Sikhs suffered and how Bengali suffered. Nobody mentions what happened to the tribal area, and they were worst off because many of them were not even literate. They didn't know what was happening. And like the Sarpanch's house that was also mentioned.
Yeah.
They said how that, the line just turned up and they didn't know what was happening. And that land was not India's, that land was not Pakistan's, it was not the British. Whose land was it? How did it suddenly separate? So I think this is a very important talk that is filling in a little bit, or at least whetting our interest in an area which has been shamefully neglected. And we see the effects of the shameful neglect in conditions that are happening in Manipur and in different parts of the world. The more knowledge we have, the more understanding we have, the less conflict we have.
More empathy, I would say. Yeah. If I just mind. So, very recently I was sort of having a conversation with some people, academics, So, many are of the opinion that, the Northeast has been worked on so much, people are thinking in them about Northeast. I'm like, but that is so not the point. We are speaking so much, and even then, the issues are not being resolved, right? So there is,
Too late.
exactly. And then yesterday, just I was talking to Amar out there. So he said he really wishes to work on partition, but he felt that it has been too much work upon what was spoken about. I was like, see, you just need to give them a new angle. If you like it, work on it. No one, everyone talks about Bengal partition and Punjab partition. That's it. Yeah, exactly. What about the two kitchen areas? Mizoram, Nagaland, if let's say, if the line was not drawn there, so Mizoram is their post-colonial idea of Mizoram. But it's the same people residing on the other side of the border in Chittagong, in Myanmar.
Same problem with the cookies, right?
That's what I'm talking about, two kitchen people, right? And then even in the Punjab partition, Pakistan partition, no one talks about the plight of the Sindhis. No one, just because they have been smart and just because they have, made good lives for themselves, just because they are rich, people think, इनके बारे में क्या बात करना, look at them having a nice
But
day.
they're also discussing.
Yeah, they are.
So could I open this to discussion and not keep it to the second?
Yeah.
Very thought-provoking and thoughtful papers. And perhaps three of you don't realize this has opened up a totally new window which has not been explored in this conference yet. And it's kudos to someone like your chair who's pinpointed in a very short time the essence of your papers, where they are new. Let me just come to one conclusion for you both, at 2 points too. Or each one of you could push as your argument. Now, when you talk about the northeastern situation, one is beginning to read in the last 5 years perhaps, as Mangala said, these authors from the northeast, they are not doing anything which is unusual in the world. With globalization, I was astounded that in my PhD years in Canada, I had no idea. We always spoke of, Red Indian tha, Loka, mystical, mythical issues. No. Each one of them is a tribe. So you have the Cherokee, you have the Mississauga tribe, you have the Ojibwe tribe. Each of them has a different concept of nationhood, different context of community. Each has a different tongue, different language. So now, with this whole perception of conflict coming to the fore between the colonized settlers, colonizers, and the First Nations people. People like us, who are coming from all over the world as diaspora, they are standing up and saying, what are you talking about? You can't put us in one umbrella. We have the sovereignty of Billund. Take this argument with your Muslim womanhood, with your Morichapi and the parallels you draw between Morichapi and yes. Remember 1950s, Chinua Achebe and very vociferously had said what our own writer of Kantapura, Raja Rao had said, we have to tell our stories in English because the colonizer is not going to learn your language. The colonizer will perpetrate and promote his own language and his own culture. So better we learn his language but in our own voices. And we can talk back.
But we should also in our language.
Exactly. Exactly. So when you have Chinua Achebe and now Mbembe said, let's get English out of all the departments. You know, these are little anecdotes which still, and you understand that ours in Mizoram or in Meghalaya or in different parts of our northeast is not something that should strike us as what do they want? Why this new? No. These were all oral traditions.
Which apparently has been taught. I mean, look at how confusing it is, right? So, the northern part of Nongkynrih and let's say Srivastava civilization have always been part of the Tamil, not the Bongo, the gold Bongo, right? So the thing is, now suddenly they are in Bangladesh, Chittagong. Look at the demographics. It's, mostly, of course, now there are Bengalis, signboards are in Bengali, everything is Bengali. But the thing is that is the reason mostly of the tribals, of, the Kuki tribals, the Riyaks, the Klus, and the Teenage. So all of these, just because of some lines someone drew, very casually, now all of these are, what's the word, enveloped into Bengali. And I don't know whether a lot of you are aware, so from Kanpur University, she went to our college in Bangalore during our bachelor's and she was such an interesting thing that in 2019, Sillities, not from Bangladesh or India, they never, they are always busy, feeling insecure about their language and trying to adopt the Kolkata dialect for some reason. But Sillities in London, started to spot this, for making Sylheti independent. And now Sylheti is recognized not as a dialect of Bangla, but as a language in itself. Yeah, we finally got the recognition, and their old script is again slowly, trying to be brought back into.
That's what the diaspora does. You must be aware of how important your own difference is. The idea of difference, they want to reinstate that as their own.
When I said this in our hostel in Kynpham University, he was still a guy who calls himself Bengali. He was like, I don't need to shift over this script. I was like, no, India, Bangladesh, but why are you afraid of learning it?
So my husband's family is from East Bengal, one time East Bengal, and I remember this saying about the Sylhetis, the kind of Bangladesh speak nobody can understand. How could they? This is a separate language.
Yeah.
And now I